When the janitor caught his spinning kick midair, the black belt realized he'd made a terrible mistake. Inside, the last echo of students' footsteps had faded an hour ago, leaving only the steady swish of a mop against polished floors. Miguel Santos moved through the empty dojo with the same quiet efficiency he'd shown for the past 4 years. His custodian's uniform, faded from countless washes, bore the name tag that most people never bothered to read. To the hundreds of students who trained here, he was simply the cleaning guy. Invisible, unremarkable, forgettable. But Miguel didn't mind the invisibility. In fact, he preferred it. He worked methodically, starting from the back corner where the heavy bags hung like silent sentinels. His movements were deliberate and smooth as he wiped down each piece of equipment. The smell of disinfectant mixed with the lingering scent of effort, sweat, determination, and ambition that soaked into these walls every day. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the training mats, creating a checkerboard of light and dark. Miguel had cleaned these same mats thousands of times, knew every scuff mark, every slightly worn section that needed extra attention. This was his domain now, these quiet evening hours when the building belonged to him alone. Or so he thought. Derek Morrison, the Academy's star instructor and newly crowned regional champion, was finishing his cool-down in the private training room. At 28, he was at the peak of his abilities. A 4th-degree black belt with an impressive competition record and a teaching style that attracted students from 3 counties over. Tonight's training had been exceptional. Every kick had snapped with perfect extension. Every punch had landed with satisfying power on the pads. His training partner had barely kept up, and Derek felt that familiar rush of superiority that came with being the best in the room. He emerged from the training room, gym bag slung over his shoulder, still riding the high of a perfect session. That's when he noticed Miguel working near the reception area, meticulously organizing the cleaning supplies. "Hey you," Derek called out, not bothering to remember if he'd ever learned the janitor's name. "The back bathroom needs attention. Someone left towels all over the floor." Miguel looked up, made brief eye contact, and nodded. "Yes, sir. I'll take care of it right away." Something in that moment caught Derek's attention. Not the compliance, which he'd expected, but the way Miguel moved as he stood. There was no wasted motion, no awkwardness. The janitor rose from his crouched position with the fluid grace of someone half his age, his center of gravity perfectly balanced. Derek had spent 15 years studying martial arts, and he recognized economy of movement when he saw it. "You ever train?" Derek asked, more out of curiosity than genuine interest. Miguel paused, his dark eyes meeting Derek's for just a moment. "Long time ago, sir. Different life." "Yeah." Derek's competitive nature stirred. "What style?" "Filipino martial arts, mostly. Kali, Eskrima. Some silent." Miguel's voice was quiet, almost apologetic, as if embarrassed to claim any expertise. Derek smirked. Those were weapons-based arts, good for self-defense maybe, but nothing compared to the refined sport martial arts he'd mastered. "Stick fighting, huh? That's cool, I guess. Very traditional." "Yes, sir." Miguel returned to his cleaning supplies, the conversation apparently over. But Derek's ego, inflated from the evening's successful training, wouldn't let it go. An idea formed, mischievous, perhaps a bit cruel, but certainly entertaining. "Hey, you know what? Since you've got some background, how about a little friendly sparring? Just light, for fun. I'm always looking for different training partners, and it might be interesting to see some of that traditional stuff." Miguel stopped, his hand frozen on a bottle of floor cleaner. "I don't think that's a good idea, sir. Come on, it'll be fun. No pressure, just friendly. Unless..." Derek let the implication hang in the air. "You're worried." Miguel felt the familiar weight of a decision he'd hoped never to face again. He'd left that life behind, the competitions, the violence, the reputation that had followed him like a shadow. He'd come to America to start fresh, to be nobody, to simply exist in peace. But he also recognized the look in Derek's eyes. This wasn't really a request. It was a challenge veiled in casual suggestion. And if he declined, the young instructor would make assumptions, might even make his job here uncomfortable. "Just light contact?" Miguel asked quietly. "Of course. Super light, just technique. Think of it as cultural exchange. Derek was already walking toward the mats, clearly expecting Miguel to follow. 5 minutes, tops. Then you can get back to work. Miguel carefully set down his cleaning supplies and followed Derek to the center of the main training floor. The mats felt different under his feet than they did when he was mopping them. More alive, more familiar. Muscle memory stirred in his body like a sleeping giant slowly waking. Derek bounced on his toes, loose and confident. He wasn't even bothering with a full warm-up. This would be easy, maybe even amusing. A chance to play around with someone who'd probably learned some basic techniques decades ago and forgotten most of them. "Ready when you are, old-timer," Derek said with a grin, raising his hands into his fighting stance. Textbook perfect, just like everything he did. Miguel stood quietly, his hands relaxed at his sides, his breathing steady. He didn't assume any recognizable fighting stance, which made Derek's grin widen. This would be even easier than he'd thought. "You might want to put your hands up," Derek offered, his tone mockingly helpful. "I'm okay like this," Miguel replied softly. Derek shrugged and launched a lazy jab, about 40% power, just enough to make contact and prove his point. It was a simple, straightforward technique that any beginner should be able to see coming. Except his fist hit nothing but air. Miguel had somehow moved. Not dramatically, not with any showy footwork, but he'd simply wasn't there anymore. He'd shifted maybe 6 inches to the side, and Derek's jab passed harmlessly by. Derek pulled back, slightly confused, and tried again. This time he added a cross behind the jab, a 1-2 combination he'd thrown 10,000 times. His technique was flawless, his speed impressive. Both punches missed. Miguel had barely seemed to move, yet he'd slipped both strikes with minimal effort, his expression unchanged, his breathing still calm and steady. Derek's smile faded. This wasn't right. He was a regional champion, and this janitor, this old man, shouldn't be able to avoid even his casual strikes so easily. "Getting lucky?" Derek muttered, more to himself than to Miguel. He stepped up his intensity, throwing a quick combination. Jab, cross, hook. His hands moved in sharp, practiced patterns. Still, Miguel weaved through the attacks like water flowing around stones, his movements minimal and precise. Growing frustrated, Derek committed fully to a spinning back kick, one of his signature techniques, powerful and fast. In competitions, opponents rarely saw it coming until it was too late. Miguel caught his leg mid-spin. Not blocked it, not deflected it, caught it as casually as someone might catch a thrown ball. His weathered hands gripped Derek's ankle with gentle firmness, stopping the kick's momentum completely. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Derek, balanced on one leg, his other captured in Miguel's grip, suddenly realized he'd made a terrible miscalculation. "Sir," Miguel said quietly, his voice carrying no malice, no triumph, just simple statement of fact. "I think we should stop now." He gently released Derek's leg and stepped back, his hands returning to his sides. But Derek's ego, bruised and desperate to reassert itself, wouldn't allow retreat. "No way, old man. That was just a warm-up. Let's actually spar." Miguel's eyes held a sadness that Derek, in his wounded pride, couldn't interpret. "Please, sir. This isn't necessary." "What's wrong?" "Afraid you can't get lucky twice." Derek was bouncing again, but this time there was tension in his movements, aggression replacing playfulness. Miguel sighed deeply, and something changed in his demeanor. The humble janitor seemed to fade away, replaced by something else. Something that had been there all along, just hidden beneath years of deliberate obscurity. "As you wish," Miguel said quietly. What happened next would be discussed in the academy for years to come, though Derek would rarely speak of it in detail. Derek launched his best combinations, the techniques that had won him trophies, the sequences he drilled until they were automatic. He threw everything in his arsenal. Spinning kicks, flying knees, quick hand combinations, feints, level changes. None of it mattered. Miguel moved through Derek's attacks like smoke, his movements so economical they barely qualified as movement at all. A slight turn of the hips, a small step, a subtle weight shift, each micro-adjustment perfectly timed to make Derek's strikes miss by fractions of inches. And then Miguel began to respond. Not aggressively, not with the intention to hurt, but with the casual demonstration of someone showing a child how something works. His hand would flash out impossibly fast, tapping Derek on the shoulder. Then the ribs. Then the jaw, so lightly it wouldn't leave a mark, but the message was clear. I could have ended this. Derek tried to grab him, to use his grappling skills. Miguel seemed to melt away from every attempt, his understanding of balance and leverage so refined that Derek felt like he was trying to wrestle shadows. When Derek attempted a takedown, Miguel didn't just defend. He redirected Derek's momentum so smoothly that the younger man found himself gently placed on his back on the mat, with no clear memory of how he'd gotten there. Miguel stood above him, offering a hand to help him up. Derek, panting and sweating, ignored the hand and scrambled to his feet on his own. His face was flushed with exertion and embarrassment. What are you?" Derek gasped. Miguel's expression remained kind, almost apologetic. "Just a janitor, sir. Same as always." Over the following weeks, Derek couldn't let it go. He started researching, digging into Filipino martial arts, trying to understand what he'd encountered. One late night, scrolling through old martial arts forums and archived tournament footage, he found something that made his blood run cold. A grainy video from 15 years ago, filmed in Manila, the Philippines' National Eskrima Championship, one of the most prestigious full-contact stick fighting competitions in the world. The camera focused on a younger man, lean and dangerous, moving through opponents with the same effortless grace Derek had witnessed. The announcer's voice, tinged with awe, and Miguel, the silent storm Santos advances to the finals, remaining undefeated in his professional career. Derek watched, mesmerized, as the younger Miguel dismantled champion after champion. Not with brutality, but with such refined technique that his opponents seemed to defeat themselves. His hands moved faster than the camera could properly capture, his footwork a blur of precision. The video ended with Miguel holding a trophy, surrounded by people but somehow still seeming alone, his eyes holding that same sadness Derek had seen in the gym. Further research revealed more. Miguel had been a legend in Southeast Asian martial arts circles. Multiple championships, a teaching lineage that traced back to some of the most respected masters in the Philippines. And then, abruptly, he'd disappeared from the martial arts world entirely about 10 years ago. No explanations, no farewell tour, just gone. The next evening, Derek arrived at the gym 2 hours before closing. He found Miguel in his usual spot, cleaning the mirrors with careful attention to detail. "I looked you up," Derek said without preamble. Miguel paused, his cloth hovering over the glass. He didn't turn around. "I figured you might. Why didn't you say anything? Do you know how many students would kill to train with someone like you? The academy would make you head instructor in a heartbeat." "You could. I don't want that life anymore," Miguel interrupted gently, finally turning to face Derek. "I had my time. I won my trophies, earned my reputation. And I learned that being the best fighter in the room doesn't make you the best person. Sometimes it makes you the worst." Derek felt the words like a physical blow, recognizing himself in them. Miguel continued, his voice soft but firm. "I came here to be simple, to be humble, to serve. There's honor in cleaning these mats, in taking care of this place where people learn and grow. Maybe more honor than in all the championships I won." "But you're wasting your talent," Derek protested, though the words felt hollow even as he said them. "Am I?" Miguel smiled slightly. "I'm at peace, Derek. For the first time in my life, I'm genuinely at peace. No ego to defend, no reputation to maintain, no young challengers to prove myself against. Just honest work and quiet evenings. That's not waste. That's wisdom." Derek was quiet for a long moment, processing. Finally, he asked, Would you consider teaching me? Not techniques, I mean, but what you know about all of this." He gestured vaguely, encompassing more than just martial arts. Miguel studied him thoughtfully. "That depends. Why do you want to learn?" "Because I just got embarrassed by a janitor," Derek said, then caught himself. "No, that's not right. I got humbled by a master who chose to be a janitor. And I think I need to understand why someone would make that choice." For the first time, Miguel's smile reached his eyes. "Okay, but we start with cleaning. properly cleaning with attention and care. The mats, the equipment, everything. You want to learn what I know? First, you learn to see honor in humble work. Over the next months, the Academy students noticed something strange. Derek Morrison, their champion instructor, started staying late. Not to train, but to clean alongside Miguel. They'd see him mopping floors, wiping down equipment, organizing supplies. All the tasks he'd previously considered beneath him. And as he cleaned, they'd talk. Miguel would share stories, not of victories but of lessons learned in defeat. Not of techniques that won fights but of wisdom that won peace. He spoke about his journey from celebrated fighter to contentment with anonymity, about the difference between strength and power, between skill and wisdom. Derek's teaching began to change. He became more patient with struggling students, more interested in their growth than in showcasing his own abilities. He started recognizing the quiet students, the ones who worked hard without seeking attention, the ones he'd previously overlooked. One evening, 6 months after their sparring session, Derek asked Miguel, "Do you ever miss it? The competition, the recognition?" Miguel thought for a moment while wringing out his mop. "Sometimes I miss the movement, the art of it. But then I remember what it cost me. Relationships, peace of mind, the ability to simply be myself without always having to be the silent storm. What I have now is worth more than any trophy. Even though people don't know what you're capable of, especially because they don't know," Miguel replied. "True strength doesn't need an audience, Derek. It doesn't need validation. It just is." A year after that fateful sparring session, the Academy hosted a regional tournament. Derek was scheduled to defend his championship title against a younger, hungry competitor who'd been talking trash for weeks, calling Derek washed up, past his prime. The night before the tournament, Derek found Miguel finishing his cleaning rounds. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Miguel asked, somehow knowing what was on Derek's mind. "Yeah," Derek admitted. "This kid's been in my head all week. I keep thinking about what I need to prove, what happens if I lose, what people will think." Miguel set down his cleaning supplies and sat on a nearby bench, gesturing for Derek to join him. "Let me tell you about my last fight. The one that made me walk away." Derek sat, eager to hear the story Miguel had never shared. "I was 33, defending my title for the 8th time. My opponent was 22, talented but inexperienced. I could have beaten him easily. I was still in my prime, still faster and more skilled. But in the first round, I saw something in his eyes. Hunger, yes, but also fear. Fear of being nothing if he lost. Fear of disappointing everyone who believed in him." Miguel paused, his eyes distant with memory. "And I realized I was looking at myself 15 years earlier. I'd been that terrified kid once, staking my entire worth on the outcome of a fight. So you know what I did?" "What?" Derek asked. "I let him win. Not obviously, I made him work for it, made it look competitive. But I gave him that championship because I understood something. His need for that victory was greater than mine. I'd already proven everything I needed to prove to myself. That title wasn't going to make me more complete. But for him, it might give him the confidence to become something great." Derek stared at his mentor, stunned. "But your undefeated record, your legacy." "My legacy," Miguel said with a gentle smile, "is not a collection of trophies. It's what I learned, who I became, and hopefully, what I can pass on to people like you." That young fighter? He went on to become a champion and, more importantly, a good teacher who's helped hundreds of students. That's a better legacy than an undefeated record I'd have defended out of ego. "So what do I do tomorrow?" Derek asked. "You fight with everything you have," Miguel said firmly. "But you fight for the right reasons. Not to prove you're better than someone, not to validate your worth, not to defend your ego. You fight because you love the art, because competition helps you grow, because it's a chance to push yourself and honor your opponent by giving them your best. And if I lose, then you lose. And you'll still be Derek Morrison, still be a skilled martial artist, still be someone I'm proud to call my friend. Your worth isn't determined by winning or losing. It's determined by who you choose to be in both victory and defeat." Derek won his fight the next day, but it was different from any victory he'd experienced before. When he raised his hand in triumph, his first thought wasn't about his own glory but about thanking his opponent for the challenge, for pushing him to be better. After the tournament, he returned to the academy to find Miguel waiting with his cleaning cart, a small smile on his face. "Congratulations, champion," Miguel said warmly. "Thank you, teacher," Derek replied, the title now fitting naturally. Years passed. Derek continued competing but with a new perspective. He also continued his late-night cleaning sessions with Miguel, cherishing those quiet hours of conversation and contemplation more than any trophy. Eventually, Derek retired from competition and took over as the academy's head instructor. His teaching philosophy, shaped by a humble janitor who'd once been a legend, focused not on creating champions but on developing good people who happened to know martial arts. And Miguel? He continued cleaning, continued his quiet existence, unknown to most of the new students who trained at the academy. But those who Derek took under his wing, those he identified as needing the deeper lessons, would sometimes find themselves staying late, learning to clean properly, listening to stories from a gentle janitor who'd chosen wisdom over recognition. The academy's walls, if they could speak, would tell of a truth that most martial arts schools never learn. The most powerful person in the room is often the one who doesn't need to prove it. 10 years after that first sparring session, Derek, now in his late 30s, was finishing a class when he noticed one of his students, a young, talented fighter named Alex, making dismissive comments about the new custodian, a young immigrant from Brazil. Derek felt a chill of recognition. He was watching himself from a decade ago, ego inflated, looking down on those he considered beneath him. That evening, Derek approached the new custodian, whose name was Paulo. They talked briefly, and Derek learned that Paulo had trained in capoeira back in Brazil, had even competed nationally before coming to America for a better life. Derek smiled and made a decision. "Paulo, would you mind staying a bit late tomorrow? I have a student who could use a lesson, a particular kind of lesson." Paulo's eyes showed understanding, a knowing smile crossing his face. "Of course, Mr. Morrison. I think I understand." The next evening, Derek suggested to Alex that he spar with the new janitor, just for fun, just light contact. And as Derek watched Paulo move with the fluid, deceptive grace of capoeira, effortlessly evading Alex's increasingly frustrated attacks, he saw the same shocked realization dawning on his student's face that he'd experienced a decade ago. Miguel, now semi-retired but still coming by occasionally, stood beside Derek, watching the scene unfold. "The cycle continues," Miguel observed quietly. "The lesson continues," Derek corrected. "And hopefully the wisdom does too." Miguel placed a hand on Derek's shoulder, pride evident in his eyes. "You've learned well, my friend. You've learned that the greatest martial arts master is not the one who defeats the most opponents, but the one who helps the most students defeat their own ego." Derek nodded, watching as Paulo gently helped Alex to his feet after a particularly humbling exchange, offering guidance instead of mockery, wisdom instead of gloating. The phoenix had risen indeed, not in victory, but in understanding. And somewhere in the quiet evening air of the Phoenix Valley Martial Arts Academy, the echo of a greater truth resonated. True mastery is not about being seen, but about seeing. Not about being recognized, but about recognizing worth in everyone, even those, especially those, whom the world overlooks. If you enjoyed this story of hidden masters and humility, watch for more inspiring tales of unexpected heroes who teach us that greatness often wears the most humble disguise. Subscribe and stay tuned for more stories that remind us to look deeper, judge less, and recognize that everyone we meet knows something we don't.